No, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. So, I can briefly introduce myself. I'm Valerie Alleger. I'm Director of Data and Analytic Strategy for Janssen EMEA, and really happy to be a part of this event today and to welcome our panelists. Maybe I can let them introduce themselves. Ruchika.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Ruchika. I'm joining from Coca Hellenic today, and I lead the data and analytics competency for Coke, responsible for driving the data-led acceleration and transformation that we are going through. Happy to be here and look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you. Moktar?
Hello, everyone. Very pleased to be here today with all of you. I'm in charge of global business intelligence at Sanofi, so essentially focusing on market data analytics for the company across the world.
Roger?
Yeah, thank you very much that you invited me. I'm Roger Illing, responsible for the operational business at Alteryx in region CEE, which means Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Piotr.
Hello, everybody. I'm Piotr Wódkiewicz. I'm responsible for global data assets and analytics strategy for Bayer Consumer Health.
Thank you, Piotr. All right, so let's get started. We'll be talking about defining and implementing a data and analytics strategy. As you can see, we have several industries represented on the panel. We have the pharma industry, we have the FMCG as well with Ruchika. We have Bayer, I think animal health, right, Piotr?
Consumer health.
Sorry, consumer health. Sorry about that. Consumer health. So we have the consumer sector also represented, and then Alteryx, who is more on the vendor and technology side, right? So hopefully you'll get a diverse perspective on this topic of data and analytics strategy. So I would like to start with a simple question. When you get to define a data and analytics strategy, where do we start? Where do we start in general? Where do you start? And where maybe did you start in your role defining a data analytics strategy? So Piotr, would you like to share some thoughts with us on this topic?
Sure, thank you very much. I mean, very good question. I think that the key for me, and this was also a key enabler in the whole journey, was to ensure that the data strategy is a part of a business strategy. So we are not separate bodies. We are really one body that speaks together. And this is for sure for us is to enable better understanding of consumers, customers, what drives them, how it drives them. This is part of, as we know, type of business strategy to grow the company. But on the other hand, this also asks the question, okay, what kind of information do we need to get to the answers? How do we, what kind of data we need to analyze in order to get to the better results in growing our business? And this is, I think, one of the first things. So before we started, we wanted to make sure that we understand where business would like to head. What kind of business questions are we asking on strategic, operational, and tactical level? What kind of decisions are we trying to make? And where is the data gap? So this is the first thing that we look into. The other thing, so the second thing that we look into is knowing that the whole concept of having all of the information at hand, it's very costly. So it was more like trying to understand what is the key and essential information that we want to look into. And this, of course, again, comes from our business strategy of what we would like to measure and where we would like to focus in our areas. And this helped us in the way that when we defined those use or value cases of how we would like to grow our company, then we look into, okay, what kind of data, what kind of information we are interested in, and how should we bring this information to us, to our day-to-day businesses, to our day-to-day users. And I mean, there are simple later questions. What is our acquisition strategy? Are we buying all of the data, or are we part of it will be our internal data? Do we start to look into whether we integrate everything, or we just look at hoc in some areas, or look in the pieces and so on? But this brings me to the next point, that or maybe even before I go there, I would say the last point that I would still, and this is what we still did, is we needed to assess our current data and analytics maturity. So understand a bit better of how our organization is looking at the data. What information do we have? What information is centralized, available for everybody, and what is really kept in like a small type of siloed buckets? Because this was, and where are we on this whole, let's say, path of from the descriptive to predictive to prescriptive analytics? So where are we there? And what kind of information help us or enable us to move forward on that path? So this was also one of the things that we needed to do. And this was the moment where, when we did all of those steps, the last point that we wanted to tick the box before we start to go into the execution is have a proper top management sponsorship. So have a proper top management, let's say the wind in the sails, so that whatever we do, we don't do alone in our small environment. And this was also the key for us. And of course, the rest, and this is when we start to go into the execution phase, we needed to have a proper vision for our data management, because at that point, we know how much information we need, what kind of different data sets we have, but we needed to make sure that we have a proper architecture for that. So it's somehow sitting in the one place for us, if it makes sense for that kind of data, but also enables other. And I would go like in simple example right now, so to give this perspective a bit different, like a picture, is that if we define that in our strategy, we want to drive global data assets. So we want to have certain data being placed centrally globally, but we still want to give a flexibility to the countries so that they can put their own data sets, smaller data sets, Excels, whatever they have, also, and combine this together. We need to have an architecture which supports it. So we need to make sure that this talks to each other. We need to make sure that in our vision of data management, we have a proper database systems. We have the master data management. So all of those aspects to make sure that later on, the governance is a bit easier, or the quality of the data also works to our advantage. Because we know that if we do not have a proper quality of the data, the decisions that we'll be making on it is not the right decision. So all of that, we should make sure that we have a vision of how we move forward and what are the steps that we need to take to enable later on the consumption of the information. I think that this is the last step. All the BI tools, the service analytics, and all those kind of nice and fancy words, how do they later on translate to day-to-day life? Because this is the moment where once we do everything that we need to do with the data, we need to make sure that people are properly using this information. And I think the last step in our case was also to identify and define the proper roles and responsibilities. So have people with the proper capabilities, proper set of knowledge to work on this information. Because I see, and this is, because in my personal thing, the best and the worst thing about big data is big data. Because people are overwhelmed with information, and they are sometimes not able to draw quickly decisions or generate insights from this information. So we need to make sure that the whole thing of how people treat the information, what are the roles needed. And I'm not talking only the technical roles, like data engineer or data architect. I also talk about people who later on are the front-face people with this information, that they are also need to have a proper understanding. And the last thing, what we did in Bayer, is that we look at what could be our global analytical solutions, which we can help in countries, especially in the small organizations where they do not have all the resources to digest this information. So how can we enable this through global analytical solutions, which are easy to use, intuitive, can tell a story with the information, with the data, so that people later on, when they are consuming this information, they are not stuck on this kind of first moment of truth, the trainings, the understanding of what am I looking at, but where they are really enabled from day one into really draw the conclusion from this information that they are having. I know that I was speaking a bit or a lot about it, but I'm very passionate about this topic, so I hope it clarified a bit.
We can see your passion, Piotr. So not only, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Not only do I have the background now, but also we are welcoming Lhoussaine on the panel. So maybe Lhoussaine, if you would like to introduce yourself quickly, and then please take the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this topic. Where do we start?
Sure. Thank you, Valerie. Lhoussaine, Ouknine. I'm heading actually analytics BI data topics within Roche diagnostics today. Yeah, so very passionate about that topic and very involved in actually such like discussion. And yeah, just maybe on what, I mean, to build up on what Piotr said and also like share some of my experience. So actually, there's not like one way of looking at the data within one company, because it depends in which organization you are. So if you go in such organization like maybe supply chain, they are maybe used more to data to actually performance driven metrics, and they are really keen to use data. If you go into some other organization, maybe they are not that mature in that. So it depends where you land. So there's not like kind of, I feel like a company culture. And the approach towards data actually can be different. So you can have like those people that are more, let's say, bottom up, and that will tell you, yes, okay, that's about the data. Let's get all the data in order. Let's get all the data accessible in good quality. And then once we have the data, we will see what we do with it. So bottom-up approach, which is also interesting, depending on the maturity of the company. And it's also, I think, laying a good playground actually for the data science, that they can access to data and they can start experiment and play. And then you have the other way to do it also, which is kind of, let's say more like top-down, where we start from the use case. And I think also, Piotr, it's something that you mentioned also, identifying what are the good use cases. And then from the use cases, then we will define what data we need, how to get the data. And actually, it's going to be kind of a reverse value chain from the use case to the data, which is interesting because also we mentioned the big data, which is kind of now maybe not anymore like a topic, right? It's not about big data, it's about the right data. But I think in my experience, I think maybe the truth is more lying in the middle. There's kind of a sweet spot between, okay, let's get the data in, and also like let's work on what are the use cases, what we want to do and to drive as value, and then we derive actually what data we need, and we think about what's the right architecture to get the data in.
Thank you, Lhoussaine. Moktar, would you like to share a few thoughts on this topic as well? I think you're on mute.
Yes, thanks, Valerie. I will build on what Piotr and Ouknine shared with us. I think when you enter into a company, and when sometimes you are within a company, there are so many transformations and disparities across those companies and level of maturities that it is important to consider, on top of the implementation approach, to consider the visioning approach when it comes to data, because you can be in a company where the maturity is very low. And if you take the extreme, a company where data maturity is very low, where data is an instrument of power as opposed to a tool of performance, this type of behaviors where everyone wants to keep data for themselves, etc. So that's one case of a company. And I think it's important to be able, when you want to drive the data agenda, to be very conscious of what company we are talking about, because data is really at the center of any companies today. And we can underestimate that it is part already of a company by itself. And when you come to transform that, you're here to transform a lot of the way people are talking about their performance, communicating around what makes them a leader and a performer in their own responsibility. So I think that it's important really to set up the right mindset, the right approach when it comes to transforming data in a company. So assessing the level of maturity is one tool to analyze this. And there are different ways. I think that we've already talked about that, the tooling, the technology, the way data is used, how data is acquired, the type of data which is acquired as well, how companies are using data beyond financial or supply chain data. So all that is important for us to get a sense of what is the company we have to deal with. And that's the first step. Once you define the step, which is really a listening step first, then you can move to the next step, which is to define a vision, a roadmap, and being a leader towards this vision, because it's not only building tools and building data and building even insights with artificial intelligence and so on. It's really leading a transformation. And that's really the moment we are in, every one of us, given the transformation touching the world that has been accelerated with COVID even. It's important to set up this vision so that you can bring with you the whole organization from top management, which is essential, to the operators as well. So visioning, setting a goal, defining, understanding where you are at the moment, where the company is, and having a clear vision of that, defining in alignment with everyone where you want to go and defining the roadmap to go there, and as well giving as well a sense of urgency, of a sense of desire to go there. I think it's really a base for a topic that can be seen as a technology topic or a poor topic. You know, when I've started in this environment in pharma, which is not very high level of maturity, we were told we were called the data crunchers. You know, so and now, you know, data is really at the top of the agenda of CEOs. And 5 years ago, none of the CEOs were talking about data. So I believe there is a huge transformation happening, and we need to first be visioning that transformation. And in order to make it happen, I will finish on that. I think it's important to not to be too much in the visioning, too long in the visioning, because you will be seen as someone who has no impact. You need to focus on 2 or 3 immediate actions that have an impact. Should it be creating a dashboard for a top leader, you know, impacting the way one country is doing business? I mean, it's very important to be as soon as possible, very rapidly providing, an impact, a tangible impact on the business, so that you can as well embark with you some sponsors on that.
Thank you, Moktar. Very true. And we'll come back to the impact very soon. I'll ask you a question about that. But in the meantime, I'd like to have Roger talk to us about how to accelerate from a vendor perspective, from a technology vendor perspective and Alteryx perspective. How do you suggest us to accelerate in terms of data and analytic strategy? Once we have set the vision, how do we accelerate?
Yeah, good question, because I believe it's already set. Yeah, it's if there's a vision, you have to execute on this vision, and how to accelerate is, I believe, also my colleague already talked about the democratizing of analytics. So if I give data now to the knowledge worker, what does he do with it? Is there always enough information? Can he really handle this? How complex is the application? Is it easy to use? Or if there's any application. So what we see is that when we empowering the knowledge workers in the organization and getting everybody in and train them and have a center of enablement who can always help and teach and educate people how to use data, then it helps a lot. Yeah, because then there will be a different understanding of what does it mean if I work in the future, and how does it impact my daily work already? And so, as I said, we need to get everybody involved into this whole process. The analyst, the scientist, and if there is a chance, and that what we see, to have a platform where both can collaborate. Yeah, so the analyst and also the scientist have a better understanding towards the solution that everybody's looking for. That helps a lot. So center of enablement, I believe, is one of the most important thing. And I wouldn't call it center of excellence, because that's already then isolated. If it's center of enablement, that is really that organization can send people there, educate people, and have the possibility to expand into the needs of the organization. And Piotr, I believe, said it before, you need also to have an easy to use application or a platform that everybody is capable to work with after a shortened time period. Otherwise, it's getting too complicated. And in this change management process, I 100% believe also it's very necessary to have top management involved and always show the first successes. Yeah, as mentioned before, if you can then show in 1 week better, how to say, having better spreadsheets or visualization of the outcome for top management, then they see immediately value. When you can reduce effort of working with Excel, which was, I believe, today still the case with a lot of knowledge workers, and having easy to use application or an easy to use tool, then you win. Yeah, but this has to be covered also by a change management process where you have top level management involved, and yeah, that you measure all the milestones and KPIs that you have in between. That's a must have, otherwise you're not able. So what I see is really, if you like to accelerate, you have to get everybody into the boat. You have to have this center of enablement where people can go to all the time, where you can provide training, not only on the tool, it's developing the people into the position that they can feel themselves, okay, I understand what does it mean to be an analyst or analyze data and integrate this into my business. And so on the other hand, also what I see very often is the type of governance, what is very sometimes hindering people to get access of data. And here, alongside this platform, you need also to have the flexibility of what I'm governed. If I go more towards supply chain production governance, is I believe much more important. If you talk to the tax people in finance, they understand exactly what they need and how the data should look like. Governance is, I believe, not something which you're really looking into, because they do the governance on their own. So in all this variety of how to say, tasks and topics that you have, that should be very important focus for the change management process. And I will repeat it: center of enablement. Also talking around these topics.
Thank you, Roger. You were mentioning actually having these small successes, right, and creating this virtuous circle where you have small successes and then you can build on them, right? So let's look now a little bit at how do we measure success in data and analytics strategy. Ruchika, would you like to tell us a bit about your experience and how do you measure success?
Absolutely. Let me continue from where you heard, from the other fellow panelists in terms of looking at the journey on how we start, how we focus, what we prioritize, right? And then getting it to the execution. And then the always good question comes in the end is, so how do you measure success? Because unless you're able to measure success and have a way of understanding impact of data and analytics, often the risk is, it might just become an academic exercise. It's a good pilot to do, but I do not know how it impacts the P&L of my business. And that's where measurement plays a very important role. I see almost it's an important aspect of your life cycle. As much as you think about every aspect of your vision and strategy, implementation and execution, change management and measurement of success are two very important dimensions that kind of close the last mile. And what we've seen from our experience, developing this for Coca-Cola Hellenic over a period of time, what really works is to connect analytics to business performance, because that's really the true measurement to understand how you're transforming the business and enabling your business strategy, which is your key focus starting point, and knowing which KPIs you're influencing. So having almost a clearly defined KPI measurement for every initiative that analytics is informing, having a simple scorecard that you can connect your business KPIs to your analytical measurement, having the right stakeholders behind this so that you're able to capitalize and understand what you're bringing back to the top line or the bottom line of your business. And then having this as a measurement also for the people who are going to be contributing to this. To me, this is all part of your measurement success, which also has an aspect of driving KPIs like adoption. right? So knowing what you're doing, is it really being used in the business? Is it really translating to the KPIs that define the success of your business? And then lastly, measuring this, from a performance standpoint, it's not always about, did I build the best model? Was I able to translate the success of that model to go into my business workflow? Is where you start seeing the measurement and success. And the other thing linking to success, which I would like to highlight, is really about being very prioritized and focused, not just on your KPIs, but also on the initiatives that are going to be important for you to drive scale. Because often in the world of data, you can get lost with the explosion that happens. However, it's not, rightly as Lhoussaine said, it's not big data, it's right data, and it's also data minimalism now. So knowing what you're going to focus on, prioritizing what you need to put into the pipeline, and picking up choices, saying no to things that are not going to be important, and scaling what needs to be scaled, and measuring performance is the instrumental part of knowing how you influence a change in the business, how you enable success in your data, how you enable growth in your business strategy, and most important, as we love to say in Hellenic, how you impact the P&L of your business.
Great, Ruchika, thank you. I think you're describing our daily life in data analytics, so that's really great, great to hear. So I'd like to, time is actually flying, I'd like to move on to kind of the fun part, the more fun part, if I may say, and something a bit more personal, maybe the one thing that you wish you had known when you started in your role. I think we're all curious to know your little tips and tricks. So Lhoussaine, would you like to start?
Yes, definitely I can. So maybe I will use also kind of some buzzwords that we are using in the data terminology, talking about the data gravity. But like it's the relationship between data and system. But I would like to say more like, I would have loved to understand what's the data gravity between actually IT and business. So is data, or was data like a business topic or an IT topic? And if it ends up being an IT topic, then I think you're going to have a lot of work. If it's a business topic, then I think your life is going to be easy. You will have the right people behind you. And this is the kind of stuff that I think I would love to know before actually joining a new role.
Great. Thank you. Moktar.
I love the word that you shared, the data gravity, and IT, between IT and business, across the different business units as well, because business is not only the, when the data is owned by the business, sometimes you have fragmented businesses in a company, and that can be as well a problem. I'll go in the same direction. For me, it's really understanding the dynamic of a company around data, who is owning the data agenda, how fragmented are the business units, what's their culture, what's the culture around data. I think that that's really the first thing you need to know, because when you don't know it, you do a lot of testing, and it can be very damaging for you, because you can hurt very strong interests, not knowing about it, because you're focusing essentially on trying to deliver your journey on centralizing data or building better data assets. So really the political aspect around data is something that I wish I would have been more mature to take in consideration when I started, at least even at Sanofi 6 years ago.
Thank you, Moktar. Piotr, would you like to share with us the one thing you wish you knew when you started, or you had known when you started in that role?
Yes, and I think, so if I put it very shortly, it would be the best organization model between IT and the business units in terms of data and analytics. And the reason for it is that throughout my career, I work on both sides, work on the IT side, I work on the business side. And for me, there is not like a big visible boundary between those two, because I still think and I still believe that there should be more business in IT and there should be more IT in the business. We are now in the day-to-day, we are using technologies as normal things. So it's not something that IT has a secret knowledge about technologies and they keep it to themselves. And on the other side, we should not bring IT solutions into companies if we do not understand the business, if we do not really understand what the benefit of having those solutions for the company would be. And I think in the data analytics space, this is even more trickier because we know that the topic is spread across those two. There are data engineers, data architects, but there are also business analysts, or I would say BIs, dependable on whether they see them, which could be sometimes seen into the business. Data science, I think this is another one. Some organizations have this as a central IT organization, in some days as a business organization. And I think that the best, if I would know the perfect model, how to interact with those two and how to set it up so it really helps to drive the digital transformation much faster, would be great.
Thank you, Piotr. Ruchika, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. I think for me, it's a data literacy. It's the extent of literacy that extends in the organization, which would have been an important measure and still remains an important measure because, again, having access to data is one, analyzing data is the other, but then interpretability and usage of the data, is critical. And that is one element which, I would say, I wish I knew, I thought about, and that's an important part, of the consideration.
Thank you, Ruchika. Roger?
Yeah, I believe I have the same here, because when we enter into companies, always about the maturity level. And what I really would like to know is how to bridge the gap between IT and business about the usage, because companies and structures are not set up in a way that we are looking for end-to-end processes, not even in business divisions. Yeah. So and also when it comes to data, it's getting even more complex. Who's owning the data? Who's producing the data? And how to make sense out of it. So you have so many different departments with different interests. And this is something where you have to bridge also as a vendor when you go in and you're involved in these kind of projects. And this is sometimes still a secret because when transparency is not there, that's very important to get it. And so, yeah, if I would have the, magic wand to understand and to have the solution for how to bridge, that would be great. And we are still working on this.
Thank you, Roger. So I think now we have questions from the audience. We have some interesting questions. There is one in particular around data quality, looking for any trick to take care of data quality as part of the data strategy. Moktar, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, I think that data quality is a very broad word, quality, when it comes to data. For me, there are several aspects to it. The freshness of the data is important. The conformity of the data is important. And when we say data quality, we think about conformity a lot of time. We say, okay, is the data right or wrong? And in many cases, there is no right or wrong. There is just alignment on what we call right and what we call wrong. And that alignment, I believe, needs to be built consciously. And that's related, a lot of what we call data quality is related to change management and governance. So there are technology aspects, there are quality control aspects, quality checking aspects, consistency aspects, if you want. But I think that the most important thing, which is beyond those more basic aspects of quality, is really the way you transform the organization, the way you train people on data, you train people on the indicators, the analytics. And that's, I believe, the most important thing when it comes to data quality, really trying to govern the data, training people, informing people about the data. And that's perhaps the most interesting thing as well when we talk about data, because that's the part that is really related to product management at the end.
Thank you, Moktar. So do we have more questions from the audience? I think we have a couple more minutes.
Yes. So that's the most important part for me as well, to have more of the participants to get engaged with all of you. I know you are busy, but please stay with us several more minutes with the questions. So Harish, I give you microphone with your question, please. Harish, go ahead. I give you camera as well. Harish, you have the possibility to speak now, if you can join us.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Moktar, for like answering the question. But I think your question answer sounds like a boiling a sea. I'm looking for kind of like some small tricks to today, actually, not like a boiling a sea. So any, I think, small steps toward achieving that big step. That's what I would understand on the data quality side as a part of the data strategy. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I think it's not a sprint data quality, it's a marathon. And you really need to take things one by one. So when you deliver a report, you need to do training with your reports. It's not just delivering data, it's as well, building, understanding, explaining. So those are the little steps if you want. If you want really a small streak, I would say I never deliver a report without explaining what's inside the report, what's the data you deliver, what's what is behind the data you deliver. So all these elements of training, communication is important to build quality. And step by step, you're building your boiling ocean, if you want. What we say in France, you from the small rivers, you build the big rivers, or you build that ocean. So, yeah.
I mean, let me maybe try to also tackle a bit. So for me, the two things is the ownership of the data to some extent. By ownership, I don't mean buying the data, but I mean making decision on this data. And I will give you the very simple. This is also something that we struggle. CRM data is one of those information where it's very people driven and it's very prone to errors. Because if there is a global process which some people do not like to follow, the sales rep has their own vision of how to input the information. Later on, if he's not being asked to track this information, or let's say make decision upon this information, in the sense of, okay, which pharmacy should I visit? If the data is not properly put into the system, he will not be able to make this decision, make the insights out of himself. He will not be having the right information at hand. The other things is like global processes and all those kind of things. But I think at the end of the day, similarly with market data, if I want to grow market share and I'm not trusting the information that I'm buying and I'm not doing everything to improve the quality of the information, that how do I want to make a right decision? So it needs to link back to the person who is working with this information to ensure that he has the best quality that he can get from this information.
If I can add, one thing on data quality, it relates to the measurement. And again, often a question asked is, how do I know whether the quality is right and how do I measure? So it is also advisable to look at a scorecard when it comes to your data and make it very tactical to exactly the type of data that you're talking about. This is where, it also connects to an ability to know exactly whether you're improving or, decreasing on the quality of your data, and then connecting it to your cases, right? If you have use cases and you have 5 data sets, report the quality of each of these 5 data sets with a very well-defined data quality scorecard, which clearly tells you the health of your data. And it clearly tells you the impact it has to all the business applications and analytics applications that will get connected to this data.
That's like showing the mirror. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. If Harish, you got the reply? Yes, okay. So I would like to have one more question, if you allow me. Daria from CNA. Daria, can you please join us? Yes, Daria, you have camera and microphone options, so you can just speak and raise your question.
Hi guys. So I was wondering what was the biggest pain points that you encountered in your work and how you solved it. Like what should we look out for so to not repeat your the mistakes that happened during it.
So I can start. Change management is super critical. Don't underestimate the change management that you need for acceptance of any analytical work that you do. Whether it's simple, easy, fancy, not so fancy. Again, this is where the biggest effort lies, which often is underestimated.
Thank you. That's actually quite interesting. Yeah. So you mean the change management that needs to happen in the business to incorporate all of the, say, results?
It's the adoption of the analysis that you're doing. It's the end user who's going to be using the insights that you create.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Roger, if you have something to add.
No, I would say it's exactly that. And if you not focusing on this change management and the education of the understanding for the end user, then it's useless. Then you do not see adoption in the business. Projects will slow down, and this is then it's failing.
Thanks a lot. Lhoussaine, something to add, or we can jump to the next question?
Maybe let's move to the next one. I think it's
okay.
covered.
Thanks a lot. Daria, I hope you got the reply.
Yeah,
so I would like to give microphone to Martin. Martin Beck. Martin, you have a long question, so if you could be so kind to jump in.
Yes, yeah, I'll put it quickly. So in my opinion, often the first step for a proper data analytics strategy is to redesign your data information architecture. Do you have any recommendation on how to actually sell any boring project that you might lead to data strategic transformation for a company?
I have one, if I may.
Then Valerie, please go ahead.
I'm leading the panel, but I can give one because I've been also doing that recently. I think one thing that works pretty well is benchmarking, is looking at how the competition is doing, is looking at how maybe other regions, other parts of the company are doing. And I think that's the one. Of course, the obvious answer would be to look at the use cases and the value. And we already talked about that. But the other trick that or tip that I can give is really to benchmark ourselves in the external world, I would say.
But I will bring the value case or use case example, because I think as obvious as it is, if you bring the proper one saying our current architecture will not support this. So as much as we would like to be future ready AI and so on, but our current architecture will not enable us to drive this use case. This could be still one of those which can open the door, because this is, with the benchmarking is tricky because we always know that there is somebody better. Then we need to convince that we want to compete in that area. But I think that this is I think both works perfect, and this is where I would say yes.
But when I say benchmark, I mean, like Moktar said, go back to the data maturity, right? Where are you? I think that's something you really need to do if you haven't done so. Look at where you are compared to the average of the industry, maybe also the top competitors in terms of data analytics, but also maybe other industries as well, and looking at how you can increase even competitiveness by data analytics, right? By the outcomes of the analytics solutions, the analytics use cases that you will be producing.
I would add something on that. I think as well, it's important to properly understand what is already there in the company, to recycle it, because I think that in data, we tend to, when we arrive, we tend to say, okay, we're going to rebuild everything. And we restart from scratch, very, very scratch. And we take time to go back to the end user with fancy AI solutions, while sometimes you have tools that are good enough if you want to build those solutions. We should not forget that for AI projects, 80% of the time, and I've even some colleagues who are telling them that 100% of their time is focusing on pure data management, and the other 100% is focused on building the AI models. So it's very important to be in an agile mode, to be very, very agile in sometimes not having a very clean, cutting-edge technology or architecture, but being able to capture the data in order to showcase what can be done with this data. And in parallel, once you get the buy-in on this outcome, you carry on building your architecture. But I'm not a believer of starting from scratch, rebuilding everything from scratch, and then delivering value. I don't believe that it's a very agile way to build things. We have an example at Sanofi. We've been building an AI application for finance that is used by many people in the organization, including top management. The company who's been helping us doing this, they just started by understanding what are the databases that were there. And many people from our IT colleagues were telling, no, but this database is not the right standard. This database doesn't have the right technology, or this is shadow IT, etc., etc. Well, actually, the focus was we need that data to build that application. So,
yeah. Maybe if I may add to that also, I think you're right, Valerie. It's interesting to compare actually to benchmark and compare to actually the competitors or in the industry, because this is also creating good tension, and you see like you are kind of behind, and then you need to catch up, and why are they there? We are not there, etc. So that's creating a good tension. But I think you also need actually to jump on waves, and there have been the wave of the big data. Now we're talking also about the data mesh, and we can jump on that wave and actually ensure that the company is at the top and of the technology and what's coming next. So that could be a strategy. But I think what we also did at Roche is some initiatives that were labeled data and infrastructure have been relabeled data and insights, because yes, the infrastructure is just it's an enabler. The data is enabling actually us to deliver better insights and to drive actually business value, to answer a business question. It's just like, for me, also an aspect on the branding of what you're doing. If you're just saying, hey, we're going to provide you with the latest modern architecture, great. But what does that mean for the business? I think it's really that education, how you actually articulate the business value that you are creating.
Thanks a lot, Valerie. I was just trying to be your assistant to accelerate and make it easier, this questioning. That